guys, welcome to Isolation Chamber. It's Sir Midge, you're here. We're going to be playing some historic, traditional best of three with green-red aggro. I've got my secret lab chair, it's finally arrived, so it's been really comfortable while I've been playing these games. Old mate Teferi over there, he's a bit peeved that I've not let him use the chair, but hey, I paid for it, he didn't. So before we get into the games, let's have a bit of a look here at what we're going to be playing. We're on the historic Gruul Stomp. So, green-red, it's pretty straightforward. You play big creatures, you play them quick, you beat the opponent's face in before the opponent can get online, but you get to have a blast while you're doing it. So we get to play Pelt Collectors, we get to play Robber of the Riches, we get to play Burning-Tree Emissaries, we get to play Rekindling Phoenixes, Questing Beast, we get Gruul Spellbreakers, Embercleaves, because it wouldn't be green-red Stompy without Embercleave, so we all know that. Embercleave is almost a keystone of any green-red deck at the moment. We get in the sideboard Lava Coils, Cindervines, Rampaging Ferocidons, which come in real handy when you come up against those pesky Uro builds. We get Lovestruck Beast, Vivien Reid, and the Great Henge. The deck's been a great deal of fun. I've had a lot of really good games with it. Some of the games have gone really well. Some of them have been a little bit grindy. The Nexus control decks have been really grindy to play against, but we fared okay. Our win percentage is very good with it. So don't forget, before we jump into the games, that you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, all at Isolation Chamber Gaming. So go and like my socials. You'll get to find out when I'm streaming, when I'm making content, when new stuff goes up. You'll get alerts. And very soon I'm planning on offering a giveaway of some description once we get to a set number of followers on Twitch and YouTube. So make sure you go follow there, share the channel around with anybody you think might be interested in the content and what we do. I want to make a lot more historic content moving forward. A bit overstandard, so if we can make some more historic content and have a blast and play some different decks, that'll be great. So enjoy the games, leave any of your comments below, and I'll see you next time. Alright guys, here we go, game one of historic Gruul Stompy. So we had a pretty good run these games. I'm actually doing the voiceover after I've played the games. Just trying and experimenting with new ways of doing my content, so hopefully this works out well. So who have we got? We've got Argon Beluga for round one. And we're on the play, which is always handy when you're playing an aggro deck. So we'll play here, and this hand's not so great. 3 Questing Beasts and 1 land, so we're going to mull this hand. That's a little bit better. So we've got Llanowar Elves, we've got Pelt Collector, Robber and Gruul, so it's not a bad hand. Would have been better if we'd got this maybe on our first hand, but I think that we can, with Gruul Spellbreaker being there, and Robber of the Rich, so we got turn 1, 2 and 3 plays. So I would dare say that we can realistically keep this, and we'll probably just pitch the Elves. T1 Pelt Collector, FTW. So being able to cast Robber of the Rich here, buff Pelt Collector, and then swing for 4 and trigger off the Robber is really good, especially when we hit the Nexus. So that was the turn where I was like, right, we really need to beat the opponent's face in very quick because we don't want them getting their Nexus online. So here we get in for 3 points of damage with Gruul Spellbreaker as well. So we just get to buff Pelt Collector again, we get to swing, we get to trigger Robber of the Rich again, and we get to swing for, 8 points of damage. So it's a pretty quick clock for game 1, with the opponent being on 8 by turn 3. It's always great for us and not so good for the opponent, especially when they're playing like a Bant Nexus list. So at this point here, the opponent Uros, we kind of assumed that was gonna happen anyway once they hit their 3 lands. It gives them a bit of a life gain clock there, but I'm not overly concerned. We've got another robber there. We've got Domri, so I think we just play Domri here and tick Domri up, play the robber, and just swing. So it's just Gruul doing Gruul things. The Shatter off the top was fantastic for us, so was the Tef. And we get there with Xaxes on lethal, thanks to the Gruul Spellbreaker and the Domri giving everything +1. So sideboard's a bit interesting here. From memory, I don't think we actually changed anything out of our sideboard in this game. I believe we just went with what our main board is. Nothing really helps us. I mean, the Cindervines, seeing what they've got in their deck, the Cindervines, there's an argument for Cindervines to go in. Because they run a lot of, non-creature spells. They gain a little bit of life with Uro, but I don't feel the need that Ferocidon is needed in this matchup. So we go with main board as it was. In hindsight, maybe I should have gone with the Ferocidon into sideboard, but it's one of those, you're not wrong if you do, and you're not wrong if you don't. Because we only saw one Uro, and to put a Ferocidon in just for Uro isn't necessarily needed. If we'd seen a lot more Uros or a lot more life gain of some description, then maybe we could have. But we'll keep this hand here on the mull, because this hand's really good. Again, we can play Pelt Collector T1, we can go into Burning-Tree Emissary turn 2, so that's quite good for us. And a robber off the top, so we can literally go Pelt Collector, and then next turn we can go Burning-Tree into the Robber of the Rich. Another land off the top, which isn't bad for us. We actually need the land at this point. Keeping a 2-land hand's a little bit iffy, but you know, with what we had in hand, it was okay. Drawing the 3rd land's good, because now we're guaranteed to get to our Gruul Spellbreaker at least. So we'll add the 2 from the Emissary, we'll tick up the Pelt Collector and play the Robber. And the opponent's having a bit of a think. Robber's going to resolve, and we get to go to a combat phase. Trigger the Robber, which is always good. And we hit the Chemisters, so we take them off a bit of their draw engine, which is great. Because the last thing we want is our opponent on a Nexus deck being able to draw cards and draw into their answers. We want to make them have the answers in hand at this point. So they're going to play a land, they're going to pop, and I believe there was actually a Shatter the Sky at this point. So that hurts a little bit, but we get into 3 points of damage with the Spellbreaker. So it's not great losing our board that early once we just set up a few things, but look, we got the Spellbreaker there. The Spellbreaker's at least got Hexproof on our turn, which gives us Hexproof, which is good. but, you know, it is vulnerable during our opponent's turn, which is always a risk when you're playing against these types of decks that, you know, they might just pop another Shatter the Sky for it. In this instance, they've got the Aether Gust. So we'll put, I believe we put the Spellbreaker on top here. Yep, we do. So we think about casting the Druid, but we just decide to go with the Spellbreaker again. I mean, we don't want to give them free information of what's in our hand because they don't know it's a Druid. It could be anything. And at this point, we're really just trying to race the life total out to keep ahead of them being able to get their Nexus loops online. So the opponent's been digging pretty hard for their Nexus. And they're having a think about what they're going to do here. They've got 4 mana up. So there's a second Shatter the Sky. Second Shatter the Sky isn't great for us, not when we're 3 turns out, but, you know, Burning-Tree Emissary here is fine. And at this point we just cast the Druid. We're going to put the pressure on. If they don't have an answer to it, then we can swing in next turn and drop the Embercleave. They have the Teferi. And then at this point here, we have a bit of a think because we could swing at their face. So we think about casting the emissary, but it's not going to happen just yet. And I go to attack at their face and then think about the fact that Teferi is going to stop the Embercleave coming in, so we don't really want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to swing at the Teferi. Kill the Teferi so that we can Embercleave next turn.
This is hardly my worst defeat.
They know that we've got the Emissary, so we cast the Emissary before we end our turn. We make no use of the extra mana that it gives us, which is unfortunate, but we are now presenting lethal on board with Embercleave if they do nothing this turn. So they've done nothing, we go to combat. In comes the Embercleave. They have a think. I worry that they might have a counterspell. They do not have the counterspell. And we get there with lethal damage. So that's game 1, 2-0 guys. 2-0 on game 1. And then we go to game 2. And here we go guys. Game 2. So game 1 went really well. I think we got a little bit lucky with the opponent not getting online game 1, and we had a couple of lucky breaks in the second game as well after a couple of Shatter the Skies. So game 2 we played Sea Lillo. And again, this was a fun game. We had a couple of good games in this one here, and there were some good plays and some lucky breaks. So the opening hand here, we've got 3 forests, a Rootbound Crag, Domri's Ambush, Robber, and Llanowar Elves. So the hand's a little bit slow because we can really only go Llanowar Elves into Robber and into a Domri, but we're going to keep it because we've got enough land there that we can curve out and play just about everything in our deck. And it'd be nice to just top deck something you know, something big in a couple of turns. We've got the Pelt Collector here, so we drop the Pelt Collector so that we can Robber on turn 2 and try and do what we did last game. But the opponent's on the mull, so we're not actually going to trigger our Robber of the Rich when we go to combat, but we'll still get to potentially swing for 4 points. Opponent's sizing up the Pelt Collector here, and I start worrying that maybe they've got something random to get rid of it. Maybe they're going to Aether Gust it, but they don't. So we go and go for the Robber of the Rich. And the opponent has a Growth Spiral, so we're okay. So we'll get the Pelt Collector down, and we get to swing for 4, but no trigger off the Robber of the Rich, which is a shame. But you can see there that we've drawn the Rekindling Phoenix, but we don't have the second red to cast it, which is a bit unfortunate. But that's okay. We'll see if we draw the red down the track. For the time being, though, we're looking okay. The opponent's on 16. They've got a Wilderness Wreck, so instantly we start getting a little bit concerned about what they're potentially running. The initial thought is that they're probably running some sort of Simic ramp into Nexus. We get another Robber of the Rich, so we think about what we're going to play here. I think at this point here we just play the next Robber of the Rich. We don't get to trigger Pelt Collector again, and we don't get to trigger anything off the Robber of the Riches because we just don't have less cards than the opponent, but that's okay. They get to take 6 and go to 10, so it puts us on a really good clock here to beat the opponent potentially. They've just dropped a blasting station, I believe it is. Not a blasting station, but you can obviously blast zone. That's it. So they tick that up there. Put it on 2 counters because they want to try and keep us off the Robber of the Riches, which is pretty reasonable. I mean, the Robber of the Rich is pretty threatening at the moment, especially if we can dump our hand quicker than they can. We don't hit the other land, which is a shame, because now we're sitting on three cards in hand. We can't cast any of them, and we can't trigger our Robber of the Riches, which is unfortunate. But we do get to swing here for potentially 7 points of damage. Which, based on Blast Zone being on 2, we all know isn't going to be 7 points of damage. So goodbye to our robbers. It's unfortunate. I would have liked to have at least gotten a couple of triggers off them, but we couldn't. We just couldn't find that second red land to get rid of the Rekindling Phoenix out of our hand to trigger them. So the opponent goes with the Jor-El. The card's really good. I'm very impressed by it in Standard, and I'm even more impressed by it in Historic when I've seen it played in Historic. So the opponent's sitting on 1 card in hand. Odds of it being a counter spell are a little bit slim. We can Domris here and fight the Jor-El, so that's what we're going to do. And we get in for a sneaky 4 points of damage here. So the opponent's on 3, so at this point here, we're sitting pretty well in the hot seat to take game 1. A second Jor-El from the opponent, which is, really good for them. Not so great for us, although we do have the Domri's Ambush in hand, which allows us to get around the Jor-El, which is fine. They get to untap, which is not so good for us. Then in a cycle, they're going to make a 2/2. So they're digging for an out here. They get their 2/2, which is fine. The 2/2 would normally be a bit of an issue for us, but having Burning-Tree and having Domri ambush is pretty good for us. We could go Burning-Tree here for 2, which would then give us the extra 2 for the Rekindling Phoenix, but we decided not to. We're actually going to Domri, and we're going to use our Llanowar Elves to fight the wolf, because at least then we get a positive trade in our favour if we have to go down the path of fighting the Jor-El with the Llanowar Elves. So the opponent's now on 1, so we're sitting pretty hot. We don't cast the Burning-Tree because we want, if there's a way for them to deal with our creatures, we want to be able to go Burning-Tree into Rekindling Phoenix on our next turn. So there's no point in overcommitting to the board at this point. And so they've drawn Blink of an Eye. The card, it doesn't save them by itself, but it does ease the pressure off them a little bit. It means they've only got to find one more answer to deal with one of our creatures to keep themselves alive. So they pay 2 here, they float the mana. They're going to cast Blink of an Eye, and they're going to kick it. Bye-bye Pelt Collector. They get to draw a card, good for them. Needs to be an answer of some sort to our elves. So as their opt, they're digging again. I think at this point maybe they're just trying to hit a second Blink of an Eye or something of that effect, so that they can just prevent us swinging for lethal. They don't do anything, they concede, and we go to game 2. So game 2 here, we actually decided to make some sideboard changes. Based on what we had seen, there was a lot of ops and bits and pieces. We actually, for this sideboard here, I think we sideboarded incorrectly in game 2. I really do. We, from memory, we sideboard in Cindervines for this one here, which I think is a bit of a bad sideboard for us. We actually remove Embercleave in total for the Cindervines. The thought process was, if they're playing a Nexus deck of some description, we didn't see Nexus, but if they're playing some sort of, Nexus Simic build with Jorel as an alternate win con, then there's going to be a lot of recurring triggers for Cindervines. There's a lot of draw spells, or a lot of spells we saw that were non-creatures, so that also was a thought process. But I think after this game, I think it was just a bad card to be sideboarding in. But I'm sure we'll see that. So with this one here, we got 2 lands. We'll keep it because we can realistically fix with Paradise Druid. We've got Burning-Tree Emissary, and we've got Domri. So the hand's not horrible. Could be a little bit quicker. A turn 1 play would have been nice. Even just an Elves would have been nice on turn 1, but it is what it is. So the opponent is having a think here. And they pass turn, so we get another land. So the plan here is to basically put as many creatures onto the board as possible this turn. So we're going to go Burning-Tree into Paradise Druid, or attempt to. There is an Aethergust, so we unfortunately don't get to go 2 creatures on turn 2, which puts us back a little bit. And we have a bit of a think here about whether we actually need to keep the Burning-Tree on top or not, or whether we'd like to push it back. We do choose to put it on top in this instance. Thinking about it now, I think we maybe should have just pushed it to the bottom and tried to, get something a little bit more aggressive, but that's okay. They play their scoos. We get our Emissary. Get to play our Forest. We, in this instance, cast our Emissary. So we got 2 options here by casting the Emissary now. We can either cast our Druid, which will allow us to fix and get to our Questing Beast next turn. We can also cast our Bonecrusher Giant for the Stomp side to kill the Ooze. Or we can cast our Spellbreaker. So we've got a couple of options. Realistically, the 2 options that I think were really needed to go for here were either to cast the Spellbreaker or to shoot the Scoos. Both would have been good options. Even casting Domri is not horrible, but if we were to fight the Scoos, we would lose our Emissary. So we commit to going for the Paradise Druid. In hindsight, I think we should have just killed the Scoos with the Stomp, but hindsight's a valuable thing sometimes. Opponent has a bit of a cycle and a dig. and they resolve a Tameo, which isn't necessarily great for us. They're digging for wreck. We assume that that's what they were going to dig for, but they don't hit it. We hit a Llanowar Elves off the top, but at least we can cast our Questing Beast here, which by playing the Druid actually worked out probably good for us because we get to swing in and, you know, deal 4 points damage to them and Tameo. I still think, realistically, shooting the Ooze may have been better for us in the long term. But, you know, we will never know. So we just swing in here with the Questing Beast. We take him to 16, deal 4 points of damage to their Tameo as well, which is good for us. They'll have another dig this turn with Tameo, I'm sure. And they've got another Jor-El. So they still can't block our Questing Beast. They've cast Uro. Uro's going to obviously go to the graveyard, ready to be escaped at some point. They'll get another 2/2, so they still can't block our Questing Beast at this turn, at this point in time, which is great for us, not so great for their Tameo.
I know I noted this somewhere.
So they have another dig for Wilderness Wreck, and they still don't hit it. So at this point, we're feeling okay. They've got one card in hand. They've dug for Wilderness Wreck twice and haven't hit it. We've got a Questing Beast. We can do a bunch of stuff. So at this point here, we shoot the Jor-El with the Bonecrusher, which I think is fine. And then we cast Llanowar, which in hindsight was actually a really, really bad play. I believe we should have Domri's ambushed and fought the Ooze this turn, because they can't make the Ooze bigger at that point. They were tapped out. I think that would have been a better play, but we didn't do it. The Llanowar Elves really just netted us nothing that turn. It was just an extra creature on the board, which we didn't necessarily need. Part of the thought process for not Domri's ambushing was the fact that they may escape their Uro, and then we can Domri's ambush, targeting our Questing Beast onto their Uro. But I still just think we should have killed their Ooze. The Domri's ambush is good because we don't lose our Questing Beast to the Uro, but we still could have Domri'd and fought the Uro with our Questing Beast. We would have lost the Questing Beast, but we could have killed both their creatures, potentially. Another land off the top. It's not great. Doesn't really do a great deal for us at this point. We'll pain for the 2 though, because we want to be able to have the mana available. So here we go with the Domri and the fight. Or the deal damage, sorry, it's not fight. And the opponent has a bit of a think here. And this is where the tides of the game really shifted. So the opponent has Aether Gust. They're going to target our Questing Beast, which is unfortunate because now we don't get to kill their Uro. We have a bit of a think, and we end up casting the Spellbreaker here rather than the Domri. If we cast the Domri, it just becomes an attack target. And so now we're having to shore up our plan to try and kill the Uro. And the only way that we can do this guaranteed at this point from our end without any interaction from the opponent is to cast Questing Beast and then cast Domri and make Domri, or use Domri to make Questing Beast fight the Uro at this point. Because we don't want the Uro hanging around, it just nets our opponent too much value. The opponent's still thinking about what they're going to do here. And so we think about it. The opponent hasn't swung, which is good for us. They don't get to net any value off of their Uro this turn. And the reason they haven't swung is because we are able to block it and kill it. It's not favourable for us. It's actually quite favourable for the opponent because at an absolute minimum they 2-for-1 us. But we'll go with the Questing Beast again here. No attacks, because we're not guaranteed that the Questing Beast is going to be blocked by Uro. He probably should have attacked there, realistically, because it can't be blocked by the ooze or anything else. So attacking there probably didn't hurt us at all. It probably, at a minimum, netted us 4 points of damage to the opponent's face, and at a worse perspective, we trade with their Uro. They have the extra creature in their graveyard for the Scavenging Ooze, and this is where the game sort of drags out a little bit in this game. We realise that yes, they are playing Simic Nexus, and so now we're in a bit of trouble. They've got somewhere around 34 cards, 33 cards left in their library at this point in the game. So the odds of them being able to continuously hit Nexus is becoming better and better for them. And so now we really have to try and work out how we can try and beat them before they can get their Nexus recurring engine online. So we cast our Domri. And there's an Aether Gust, which isn't great for us, because again, it's another turn that we can't guarantee we can kill Uro. So we just go in hard, we drop another Bonecrusher, we've got a bunch of 4s. 2 4/4s, a 4/3, a couple of 2s. We'll empty our hand, and now the game just becomes top deck wins. We know what our next card is, our opponent doesn't necessarily know what their next card is just yet. But they are going to get a Scry trigger on their upkeep. We have a bit of a look at what's in the yards here and try and work out what the best point of attack is moving forward for this game. It's not looking pretty for us at this point though. Realistically, in hindsight, I should have attacked this turn, and I should have attacked last turn with the Questing Beast at a minimum. The reason we didn't attack this turn is because of the fact that we knew they could tick their Scavenging Ooze up, but I still think we should have done it. If only for the fact that it's one less creature that we have to worry about, and we can still potentially block out the Uro. So I think we should have done it, but we didn't, and that's potentially cost us 8 points of damage, because I don't know whether they would have committed the Scoos to blocking. They probably could have just worn the damage with Uro being on the board. And now they cast their Lovestruck. So the Lovestruck can't attack, obviously can block. So again, not great for us, because now they've got 3 fairly large blockers, so it makes combat a little bit clunky and awkward for us. We know that Domri's going to resolve here because the opponent's hand is completely empty. They're going to have a bit of a dig. They hit a Nexus. Not so great for us.
It's a beautiful day for chaos, isn't it?
So at this point, it's a bit of a what do we do thought process. If we make, whatever we make Questing Beast fight, will die. So we actually go to attacks, which I think we probably should have made something fight Questing Beast first and then gone to attacks, but the result effectively works out almost the same. Except for the fact that we don't get to kill Uro this turn. And attacking with everything is a bit of a punt on our behalf. I should have left Burning-Tree, Paradise Druid and Elves back. But at this point, knowing they're playing Nexus, I felt we really needed to try and push extra damage where we could. Unfortunately, we're not going to get a favourable trade-off like we would like with Uro here. So effectively, this attack phase here, this combat phase here, has just punted the game for us. Because their Uro doesn't die, and we lose so much. We lose so much. So we do get to kill something here, because we can make our Elves fight something. The Elf has to fight the Uro, so that we can trade off favourably. Then we know that they can't attack with the Lovestruck Beast.
We are the many.
In comes the Nexus. Take another turn. See Lilo. The opponent growth spirals here. Plays a land. Happy days for them. Not so happy days for us. So the combat phase wasn't horrible. I mean, we got to wipe most of their board. They can't attack us, but now we're literally playing the top deck game, and we know that they've got Nexuses in their deck, and we know that they're on very few cards left in their deck, which is even worse for us. At this point here, they're down around 20-something cards now. And they just get closer and closer to being able to draw their Nexuses as they need them. The opponent's down to 14 minutes on the clock, though. We did have a bit of a peak there. And we play a couple of turns here because we want to see whether we can draw something off the top that does get us back into the game. Unfortunately, an Embercleave at this point would have been great because we would have traded favourably with the Uro at a minimum. But we took them out for the Cindervines, and this is where I think maybe it was a bad sideboard on our behalf. Opponent growth spirals at the end of our turn. We know they've got another Nexus in hand, so we prepare ourselves for the opponents to take an extra turn here. So it's a little bit tough. This second game is a little bit tougher than the first game, and certainly much tougher than the very first round that we played. We went 2-0 against Argon Beluga. They've got Blast Zone out again. At this point here, we have to decide whether we want to keep Domri around or not. We're in dire straits. The opponent's getting extra turns. We know that, so we just let this go through and kill the Domri. The Domri doesn't really do much for us at that point. We can't fight favourably with anything, especially with the opponent having an extra turn. I mean, we're just going to block and lose our creatures. So we play a little bit longer here. The opponent drops a Wilderness Wreck. Again, their time's getting chewed up. So, you know, we do lose this game. Very shortly, we just concede this game. But, you know, the opponent doesn't have a lot of time left, so we can try and beat them in a very quick manner in Game 3. They've got less than 12 minutes to go. Opponent's still having a bit of a think. They come in for a bit of a cheeky swing with their Bonecrusher. They've effectively got us locked out the game. They've got their Nexus Loop online. We know this. We recognise it. We know we're not going to draw out of it. So we just start looking towards Game 2. Opponent's going to Tameo. And we're just going to concede this game and throw it away. We were hoping there was going to be something that we could draw, which was going to get us there. Unfortunately, it just doesn't. There's nothing that we can get there with off the top. So now we start looking at this again. The opponent gained, a little bit of life that game, enough that it became a concern for us with their Uros. So we go in with the Rampaging Ferocidons. We drop out the Cindervines, and we see how that shapes up in Game 3. So the opponent's still sideboarding. So Game 2 there was a little bit rough for us. Unfortunately, we punted a couple of combat phases, which isn't great, and we couldn't keep our engine online long enough to really push through enough damage. We get to go on the play, though, which, as we know, is great for green-red. Opening hand. So we've got 3 lands. 2 of them are Rootbound Crags, but that's okay, there's a forest there. We have the Ferocidon, we have a Robber, we have a Paradise Druid, and we have a Questing Beast, so the hand's actually not horrible. If we can resolve something like Robber turn 2, Questing Beast, sort of turn 4 on curve, then happy days. We're looking pretty good, because it's a pretty quick clock there for our opponent to try and keep up with. So we draw a Domri's off the top, we play our Rootbound. So we've got 2 options. We can Paradise or we can Robber. We Paradise here so that we can attempt to Questing Beast next turn. Questing Beast on turn 3 to swing for 4 is generally pretty good, and it's pretty hard for the opponent to deal with unless they've got an Aether Gust, which is entirely possible when they're holding up 2 lands. Opponent passes through. So our game plan here changes a little bit because of the Pelt Collector. We could have gone Questing Beast, but because we've got the Pelt Collector, we're actually going to go Pelt Collector, and we're going to try and cast the Robber of the Rich here. We think about the Ferocidon, but we decide against it because there's a lot of creatures you're going to cast after the Ferocidon, which would just hurt us. So we go with this. We get to swing in for 4 potentially on this turn. Opponents at under 10 minutes. We currently have a very good board state as well. So there's a bit of a Scoos there. Scoos is a bit painful because it potentially stops our Pelt Collector and potentially stops our Robber of the Rich, but we have top decked Gruul Spellbreaker and we do have an ambush in hand, and we also have Questing Beast. So there's numerous options that we can go with here. We have a bit of a think about the Questing Beast, and then decide against it. And we go with the Gruul Spellbreaker. Gruul Spellbreaker will pump the Pelt Collector. With the Riot trigger, we'll just give it haste. It doesn't need to have the +1/+1 counter. We want to try and deal as much damage as possible to the opponent at this point. And we sort of have a bit of a think about what we're attacking with, and we only go in with Pelt Collector and Spellbreaker. We don't want to trade off unfavourably with the Robber. There's no need to throw the Robber in there at this point. Yes, we missed the trigger with the Robber attack step because we did have less cards. But I think it was probably the better play to leave the Robber back here. We can Domri's potentially. Domri's the Scavenging Ooze next turn, and then obviously get the trigger off the Robber when we attack. There's a Wilderness Wreck there, which isn't necessarily great for us. Opponent's now under 9 minutes. They've had their warning come up. We've got a second Robber. We have enough mana to go Robber Domri's, or we could just go Questing Beast. At this point, we don't need to necessarily cast the Questing Beast, so we're going to go Robber and Domri's. Opponent has a bit of a think. There's an Aether Gust. That's unfortunate, but that's okay. So we're only going to get one Robber and attack step this turn. We will Domri's though. So we're left with 9 points of damage on the board. We're 1 point short of lethal. It seems a couple of our games this video have come down to literally 1 point of life on our opponent's side of the board. So we're sitting pretty good here. The opponent isn't playing white, so there's no Shatter the Skies coming. We know that. There might be some Aether Gusts and a few other bits and pieces, but we don't necessarily worry about our board being wiped at this point. He is going to float some mana for the Blast Zone. So we'll see what they do there. They floated a bunch of mana. There's a Nexus. It was either going to be Blast Zone or Nexus that they floated the mana for, so they want to have the next turn just to see whether they can get there. They float a couple, put some counters onto the Blast Zone. So we know that they're going to try and take something out with the Blast Zone. There goes the Blast Zone. We lose our Paradise Druid and our Robber, but we've got a Robber on top, so that's not horrible for us. They're still on 1. They get to untap, and we wonder whether they've got another Nexus. They give us the GGs though, so we know that we're probably going to get there. We're polite. We return the GGs to them, and we don't even play anything. We just go to attacks. There's no point in playing anything else. So we get there. Game. So 2-1 that game. Little bit rough the first game, but second game, but we got there. Here we go, guys. Game 3. So we're 2-0 in our 3-game series with Gruul Stompy Historic. So the question is, can we get there for 3-0 against JH Killer? Let's find out. So we're on the play again. Again, we love being on the play with this deck. It's really, really good for us. Most aggro decks always want to go first, and they always feel a little bit slower if they go second. We have a look at the hand here. So what have we got? We've got 4 lands. We've got a Domri's Ambush. We have a Bonecrusher, and we have an Elf, so we keep it. It's not the fastest hand that we've had with this deck, but it's certainly got some pace to it, especially if we can, Bonecrusher something on turn 2. That would be really good for us. Opponent's looking like they're on red. There goes our elves to a shock. But we do top deck a Paradise Druid, so we cast the Paradise Druid. At this point here, we're not 100% sure what the opponent's on. They could be on some sort of mono red list. They could be on some sort of Grixis list. It looks like they're just on a black-red aggro list of some description if they're playing Knight. We have a bit of a think here about what we want to do. So we can cast Paradise Druid, we can stomp his Knight, we can even Domri's Ambush his Knight, and we decide that's going to be the path we go down here. The opponent actually took a mull, I believe, at the start of the game as well, so, you know, if they get too ahead of themselves, they're going to run out of steam. We think about playing something, but at this point here, we don't attack and we just pass turn. We want to be able to stomp something if they play something on turn 3, and there's a Phoenix of Ash, so not attacking last turn seemed like it's the right move, because we get to stomp it here, and we get to cast our Bonecrusher next turn. So we play our Stomping Ground here, we paved 2, we play our Bonecrusher, and we go to attacks with our Paradise Druid. It was actually pointless us painting for 2. We shouldn't have painted for 2 there if we were going to attack with the Druid. We probably could have just held it back and bluffed that we had another stomp available to us, but we didn't, and we took 2 life for no reason. So we get Lightning Strike to the face, which hurts a little bit. They're going to skewer our Bonecrusher. They take 2 from that. We get to untap. We top deck another Bonecrusher, so that's always good for us. So at this point here, we could realistically play a land. We could hit them for 3, drop the second Paradise Druid, and still keep the Stomp up to kill something next turn. So we'll get in for 3 points of damage. Opponents effectively top decking like we are, but we actually have a board state at this point, so odds of us coming out on top at this point look pretty good. We'll wait and see what the opponent casts, though. They've got 2 cards in hand, and they've got their Phoenix, which they can escape at some point. So they're going to stomp our Paradise Druid. A little bit disappointing. Would have liked to have kept the Paradise Druid there, but that's okay. So the opponent just passes turn up. We've drawn another land. We'll go for 2. And we leave the Bonecrusher there again. We know that there's stuff they have in their deck which we can hit with Stomp, so we don't really want to be over-committing ourselves to playing Bonecrusher as a creature and not getting the value out of the Stomp side of it either. So Phoenix of Ash comes back, and it comes back with a +1/+1 counter, so it's out of range of the Bonecrusher. And it does have haste. So the opponent's going to get in for a cheeky 3 points of damage. But they're on 6. They're going to light up the stage. In response to the light up the stage, we're going to Bonecrush their face. With the thought process being here that if we draw a Questing Beast off the top, they die. But we don't. We play the Robber. We hope that with the Robber we can hit a shock off the top of their deck for lethal. So we then realise, after we declare attacks, that those cards aren't in their hand. They're all exiled, and we don't get the trigger off the Robber. So we just hard cast the Bonecrusher at this point. They kill our Druid. We draw a Questing Beast, and that's game. And we go to game 2. We go to attacks. opponent concedes. They know that it's lethal, and so we go to game 2. So game 1 was over pretty quickly, and we were pretty much in command of that entire game. Pretty much in command that entire game. They're playing a lot of creatures, so we actually bring in our Lava Coils. It seems like a good option for sideboard against such a sort of creature-heavy deck. We drop out the Embercleaves here, and drop out a couple of other things to get back to the game. So we're one game up, going into game 2. So the opponents, we kept a good hand here. The opponent's got a Fanatical Firebrand. We're going to enter our land tapped. We don't really want to be taking the 2 points of damage from it here. Not at all. The opponent's now dropped their knight. And we don't want the knight to stay on the board. The knight's pretty good for them. It's going to give them some card draw. It has Menace, which makes blocking a little bit more awkward and clunky for us. So at this point here, we've got double coil. We're going to probably use a coil here. We could play Pelt Collector, but the Pelt Collector will just die to the Fanatical Firebrand. So it's not really ideal for us to be doing that. So we have a bit of a consideration about it, and just decide that we're going to Lava Coil the knight. We thought about potentially Lava Coiling the Fanatical Firebrand here and letting him get a card off the knight, but we feel that this is probably a better play at this point. Then they draw a knight of Ebon Legion, which can also be quite painful for us when they start dealing 4 points of damage here, like so. Because this thing can just get bigger than our removal and outpace us. So at this point here, we have a bit of a think again about what we're going to do in this situation. We know that we could Lava Coil their knight here, but then we don't get a creature on the board. We could Pelt Collector and then Lava Coil, but the Pelt Collector would still die to the Fanatical Firebrand. But we commit to playing the Pelt Collector here, and rather than dealing with the knight this turn, we're actually going to Domri's ambush the Fanatical Firebrand to keep the Pelt Collector alive. The worst case scenario is the knight gets another counter on it next turn, and we have to Lava Coil it next turn rather than playing something like our Spellbreaker. At this point here, we lose our Pelt Collector, we take 2, the knight doesn't get any bigger, so that's okay for us. We've got a Phoenix, so if we can draw another land, we're okay. We play the Llanowar Elves, we Lava Coil the knight, and hopefully we'll be able to. I hope here at this point that the Elves hangs around for a turn and we can Phoenix. But unfortunately that's not the case. They have another Bonecrusher, so now we're on 3 lands with double Spellbreaker and a Phoenix. They've hit another giant and stomped us, so we're going to go in this instance here, Burning-Tree Emissary into a Spellbreaker. We'll give it haste and we'll swing in. We want to coax the block here, and the opponent gives us the trade. We present the trade and they accept. So they shock our Emissary. The opponent's just had removal for days against absolutely everything we've had this game. We still don't hit the 4th land, and we really need to hit the 4th land here, because we need to be able to play the Rekindling Phoenix. The Rekindling Phoenix actually provides us a really favourable block situation against their giant. They would need to top deck some sort of removal to answer the token that the Rekindling Phoenix makes. We offered up the trade. They didn't take it. They didn't take it because they knew they had to skewer. So they light up the stage here again. They've hit a land and another skewer, I believe it was. And we're going to take 3 to the face. So now we're in a lot of trouble. We really needed that to be another land, but we've just stalled on 3 lands here. We'll play the Spellbreaker. We'll give it +1/+1. There's no point in giving it haste. And we'll just hang it back as a blocker here. That's the thought process. Seems like the best point of play. They get us with a Sovereign's Bite. We get a Lava Coil, which is good for us. And we forget, and we totally punt here, that we take 2 points of damage when we target the Giant with a spell. So we actually punt the game. We go to say oops, but we don't get the time. So, look, we don't need to sideboard anything else here. We've so with this one here, the hand's not horrible. We've got 3 lands. We've got a Spellbreaker, a Phoenix, Pelt Collector, and Questing Beast. So we're going to pain for 2. Drop the Pelt Collector here. And we lose the Pelt Collector almost immediately. But that's okay. We'll play our Elves. If the Elves hang around, we get to Questing Beast on turn 3, which is really good. And not so great for the opponent. But, alas, the opponent has a shock. And now they have a Knight. But we get to present them with a bad block for them in this situation here. We'll give our Spellbreaker haste. We get to swing in. The opponent doesn't even think about blocking here, which is good for us. They take 3 points of damage. Evens up the life totals a little bit. They do have a Lightning Strike though, which is unfortunate. But again, they're using a lot of removal very early, and we've still got threats in hand, which is good for us. We'll drop our Rootbound, we'll play our Questing Beast while they're tapped out. At a worst case, we get in for 4 points of damage, and then they find a way to remove it. They go to 13. Their Knight hasn't gotten any bigger though, so that's good for us as well. We don't want their Knight getting too much bigger. We lose 3 life there. We lose 6 life there. And then they offer an attack, and I think that was a mistake by them. I don't know why they offered that up. It just would have got bigger, and then they could have pumped it and had Death Touch the turn after, but hey, that's what they've done. And we get to finally cast our Rekindling Phoenix. We won't play anything here because we don't want the opponent to know we're sitting on 2 lands. We do want to bluff as though we've still got threats. They do nothing and concede. So there we go, 3-0 guys. Games are good, some really tough games there, but we get there in the end. There we go guys, best of 3 games, historic Gruul. We get there in a 3-0 series. The deck's really, really fun. I've had a great blast with it. I'm going to keep playing it. I think this might be one of my standard historic pet decks. I love Gruul, always have. And I know that there's a lot of other content creators out there that love Gruul as well. So I'll check out what they're doing and see if there's any improvements that can be made to this. This list is very, very good. There are a couple of things that I think I might want to change, but I'll update via my socials if I change that. In the meantime, I'll put the entire deck list down below, and I'll put a link to it so you can export it to your Arena account yourself. Until then, please don't forget, if you like what I'm doing here on this channel and you like what you're seeing, please like, subscribe, follow me on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook and Twitter. That's the only way you know when I'm doing new content, when I'm doing new videos, when I'm streaming, and it's the only way you're going to know when we're doing our giveaway. I don't know what the giveaway is going to be just yet, but I can guarantee it'll be worth it, and there'll be some more information on that in the coming couple of weeks. So until next video, until next stream, may the magic gods forever shine in your favour, and may you never get mana screwed again. Till then, have a good day, and we'll see you next time.